Well, let me go to the extreme and tell you, outside my freshman history class, when a fight broke out one day, one of the boys, I'm talking about a 16, 17-year-old kid, I got stabbed in the heart outside my history class. So this was heavy stuff.
Welcome to another episode of Return on Character podcast, where we interview famous and should be famous people who think character matters and make me better for having had a chance to sit down with them. Today we have a special guest, a very special guest, Clifford Hudson, former CEO of Sonic Corp, right?
Yep.
And Clifford was at Sonic for 35 years and really stewarded the company through its IPO and beyond, and only recently stepped down, I think in 2019, if that's right, just before.
Just say December of 2018. So
2018, just in time to get ready to sit back and enjoy the pandemic in your house, right? Well, welcome, Clifford. Thank you so much for giving of your time to me and everybody else who's getting a chance to hear your story. Where do we find you today? Where are you located right now?
Well, Sonic's headquarters is Oklahoma City, and so all my 35 years of the company, I was in Oklahoma City with the corporate headquarters. I'm still here. My sons are a couple of different places, and so I enjoy the time. My sons, one in Oklahoma City and one in New York City, but most of my time is still in Oklahoma City. We've got my wife and I have a grandson here, and so that's the place to be. So
yeah, that's where you belong.
No.
The other thing I forgot to mention, which I hope you'll tell us about at some point, is Clifford is also an author of one of the best titled books I've seen in a long time, called Master of None: How a Jack of All Trades Can Still Reach the Top. I love that title because I relate with it a little bit.
Yeah, good.
I don't know that I've reached the top, but anyway, thank you for being with us. Tell us a little bit about how you got started, like where you grew up, what kind of formed your early experiences of life, your character, your family, and just the progression into Sonic, if you wouldn't mind.
Happy to do so, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity. Great to be with you and your guests today. So I grew up in North Texas, born in Dallas, and spent my elementary school years in Wichita Falls. My father owned a small business there, and he had a single partner. It was a truss manufacturing business. So they in essence made roofs for houses, And my family lived there roughly until I finished elementary school. We moved to Oklahoma City for my dad to take a different position. Why was that? So you talk about formative things in your life. When I was 11 years old, my dad's business failed completely. And I had some of the story then, some of the story later, and I never got all the story, I'm sure. But his partner had embezzled from him. And when there was a downturn in the economy, that was just laid bare. My parents really lost everything, including our home. So as an 11-year-old kid, I was the more or less functionally the youngest of four kids. I had a twin sister, but she was, at that point in time, she was a foot taller than me. So I always felt like she was a good bit older than me, even though she was only 3 minutes older than me. But at any rate, I was kind of the little kid in the family. And that was pretty stunning to lose your family home and uproot and relocate altogether. And so that was something I sometimes say, and it's literal, it's a little figurative, but literal. My father had very little concept of retained earnings. So this affected me as I became an adult. And just not to fast forward too much there, but literally when Sonic went public, the first thing I did with some of my proceeds was to pay off my home and make sure I never put debt against it again. So you can tell the impact that had on me as a kid, to see my family uprooted and what they did in my family. At any rate, we moved to Oklahoma City, where I was for the next 10 years. And there were some significant things that occurred there that really helped form me quite dramatically in that next 10 years. I then decided, and I'm happy to go back to some of that detail, probably two different things that were key. Well, let me just go ahead and touch on that. Two different things.
Tell me about them.
Okay. Then early teens and then later teens. The early teens, just in terms of developing perseverance and assuming responsibility and seeing things through. At 11 years old, when we first moved to Oklahoma City, I began delivering the morning newspaper. Actually, the local newspaper had morning, afternoon, and Sunday. So the only time you didn't deliver was Sunday afternoon. So I, for 2 years, then did newspaper delivery. And I think as a kid, that just teaches you tons of responsibility. Get up every morning at 3:30 in the morning to get out and roll the newspapers, deliver them through thick and thin, rain, snow. I mean, it was, Oklahoma can have pretty ugly weather. And so that was a tremendous maturing process through that period of time. That career for me came to abrupt end in the summer when I was 13. After having finished in delivery at 5 a.m., I got hit by a car for riding my bicycle. And so that ended my newspaper career.
You got hit by a car?
I finished delivering the papers. I was actually meeting some other kids this summertime, and we're going to get donuts, which, a 13-year-old boy who doesn't need donuts at 5:30 in the morning, And, but a driver, a guy who had been working all night, as it turned out, came along behind us, missed the two of them, but swerved back in and hit me. I was riding on a major thoroughfare. Good fortune for me, first of all, it didn't damage me more than it did. But also, the guy hit me from behind. I didn't see him coming, and so I had no, you could say you wake up with nightmares for years. No, I never had a single nightmare from it. But he hit me from behind, threw me off the road, and kind of pretty well knocked me out. Laceration across the back of my head and one leg, and 40 years later, a doctor asked me, "What did you do to your neck? Did you play football as a kid?" And I said, "Well, okay, no, I didn't play my football, but I did get hit by a car."
Yeah.
Anyway, so but the process of going through that at 11, 12, 13 years old, made good money for a kid that age, but more than anything, just learned the how to interact with people, how to, literally ask people for money, because I had to do that every month, go to every house. Then also get up, regardless of the nature of the weather, get out and get my newspapers picked up, rolled, delivered, and generally, maybe not in the summertime, but during the school year, try to get back home 5 o'clock and get another hour and a half of sleep before going to school, So this was, I think, quite formative for me in terms of diligence and perseverance, and I was always surprised as an adult the number of people that would give up on something too quickly, and coworkers or otherwise. And my reaction was, well, if you give up, you are going to fail. I'll guarantee you. So I think the perseverance I got from that was part of it, perhaps personality, watching my parents and DNA and so on, but some of it, no doubt, was. The weave of my personality I developed through that period of time. The other thing in my teen years, then, thinking about late teen years, that was quite significant in terms of my personality development, and really where I started taking more formal leadership positions. In my little book that you mentioned, Master of None, How a Jack of All Trades Can Still Reach the Top.
Yeah.
One of the things I do mention is in 8th grade, I had a music teacher who really pulled me into leadership activities in the chorus. Now, how do you do that at 13 and 14? Leadership. Answer was, if she was going to be absent from the class, I led the boys in warming up and actually led them through all of the songs we had practiced, 4-part harmony, etc. That may sound like a small thing, but it really changes your self-concept.
Yeah.
Because when you can stand before a group of 40, 12, 13, 14-year-old boys, nasty, ugly, et cetera, and get them first to warm up and then to harmonize, and you see that you're pulling them through this and they're going with it, it changes your self-concept,
For
and
sure.
it did mine. It gave me, I didn't call it leadership, but it gave me a sense of realizing that I could do this with my peers and get them to go a place they might not go otherwise, So in high school, I attended a large public high school, and when I started in ninth grade, it was the first year of court-ordered desegregation.
Wow.
And it was a very challenging period of time.
What was difficult about it? What? I mean, as a young kid, you're witnessing some pretty contentious realities, right? Of some society clashing.
Right. Well, let me go to the extreme and tell you, because this makes the point. Outside my freshman history class, when a fight broke out one day, one of the boys, I'm talking about a 16, 17-year-old kid, I got stabbed in the heart outside my history class. So this was, heavy stuff. And
was it between African Americans and whites?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the question really did become, how do we figure out how to get along, and so on. So I became, for our sophomore year, a student class officer, but also tried to work with kids to lessen the divides and improve relationships. My junior year, I was asked to become, and I ran for it and got elected, president of something called the Human Relations Club, which was geared towards improving understanding, reducing conflict, etc. And then my senior year, with a quite diverse student body, was elected president of student government, which basically was student body president, student body wide election for that. And, one of four kids running, 2 black guys, 2 white guys. I say in my book, the irony I always had there was the 2 black guys were both named White, anyway, a small irony. But Renard White and Frank White, and both my classmates and both friends. But on the first ballot, with 4 of us running, I got 56% of the vote. And that experience then, serving a year as president of student council, and still in some tough socio-cultural times, really affected my self-concept, but also my sense of being able to talk to my peers about direction to go on one thing or another, and have them listen and engage and feel my success with the process. So this is why, I told you before the show started, when I think about running a franchise organization, I would often go back to being student council president.
Cool.
How do you sell people and coming together and doing these things? And that's what, to a considerable degree, running a franchising business was all about. But I would say those 2 or 3 experiences, the newspaper boy experience in my early teens, the initial leadership capacity that my teacher saw in me in 8th grade, and then the experience in high school with a very diverse student body and lots of conflict and so on. By the time I reached 18, graduated from high school, my self-concept had evolved in a lot of ways, and my belief that I could provide leadership had become real.
Well, what's interesting too is that in a position like you had in high school, and a little bit in the franchise environment, you don't have absolute authority. So you have to find a way to win people to your side without kind of having authority over people all the time, right?
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that must have been very key to later on in the franchise world, where you have some, but you don't always have.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because in those situations in high school, you're right. That was not a command and control situation by any means. But you touch on something so fascinating, because over the years, as I would have people come to me, um, and saying, you know, I want to assume this level of responsibility with the company, but so-and-so doesn't report to me. And if they don't report to me, how am I going to have responsibility for this? And my reply, which was always an easy reply, well, you're running a franchise organization. If you've got to have people report to you in order to have influence, you're in the wrong place, Right. And that usually just stopped the conversation, on that point anyway. But that's exactly right. You have to win through influence. Now, you in a franchise organization, you can say, look, guys, we have the contract, we have the authority. But that's a pretty lousy way. You may win the moment, but you don't win the relationship in the long term. And that's not leadership dictating people,
Right.
So my background, the background in which I had grown up was really great for a franchise system. And I enjoyed that much more than I would have a command and control circumstance,
Right. Right.
It was always more enjoyable to develop a plan, have the team involved in it, have the team involved in selling it, and then some initial testing and stages, and show the success, and then sell it more broadly. That was fun stuff. That's how we ran a franchise organization. So,
Well, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, my friend Scott McLean, who was a former executive with you, I think he was president for Sonic for a while.
yes.
I mean, he told me a little bit about just the uniqueness of the Sonic culture. You showed up. How old were you when you showed up?
I started. I was 29 when I joined the company. At the time I didn't think this was the case, but it was kind of. I was 29. I was general counsel of Sonic at the age 29, which
Wow.
I thought was no big deal. I look at it now in retrospect, and I think it's almost ridiculous.
Well, but one of the things that I would love to hear your thoughts on is that you kind of grew up professionally in there. What are the lessons that you learned from a leadership perspective while you're there? And also, what was it about the culture of Sonic that was different than, say, your competitors? And what made that give you kind of an edge, if you will, as the company grew over time?
So when I arrived, Sonic was already 30 years old, and I was going to kick out. People say, "Did you start the company?" And I said, "Well, I didn't get started the year before I started. It was the year before I was born." So, but it was already a franchise organization, franchise dominated. As a matter of fact, really, when I joined the company, a group of franchisees owned the company.
Oh, really?
And it was 2 years after I joined the company. My boss, the CEO, was working on this the whole time. He wanted to buy the company, and I detail in my book how that came about. It was a little bit of a fluke that we were able to do it, but we were able to do it, both in terms of getting control of the stock and then borrowing the money because none of us had any money. So the franchisees owned a majority of the stock. Franchisees made up a majority of the board of directors, and then of course they were the franchising the system. So it was almost impossible to run the system really, and everything changed about the culture once we were able to buy the company, because you cut out that process of in essence your boss being the people you were trying to lead and topsy-turvy. So I joined Sonic as general counsel. We bought the company almost exactly 2 years after I joined the company, but we worked on it for, over a year before buying it. So my education about the franchise business came from coming in at that level. So it was never a command and control environment. And it was always a process of trying to sell franchisees on stuff, whatever it was. And my boss had a phrase, he would say, sell, don't tell, sell, don't tell. And so we were always trying to sell them on marketing or purchasing or one thing or another. And you had to do these things and show them the success. And then that success begat more success,
The trust.
So I learned, the trust, building that trust. I learned about the business in part by how we didn't make money, but also by doing these leverage buyouts. Because we bought the company once in '86, we restructured the ownership in '88. I worked intensely on both of those, working with the lenders, working with the owners, and I was an owner myself. And so I really learned how we made money, how we didn't make money, and I learned the business plan. I learned how to sell it to investors and so on and so forth. So by the time we went public in 1991, I'd been with the company 7 going on 8 years. And matter of fact, when we went effective, it was almost exactly 7 years I'd been with the company. And I'd gotten a great education. You could say in a lot of ways I'd gotten an apprenticeship, which was enormously valuable. I could not appreciate it at the time, but I can see in retrospect, unbelievable, And so once we went public, my boss, to my utter surprise, asked me to move over to the chief financial officer position from general counsel. And I said, okay. I mean, really is, I'd been general counsel for, 7 going on 8 years. And
that doesn't happen often. The general counsel moving over CFO with plus the CEO position.
Right. And I think part of that is because the training's different and the head construct is different, But I do think I had become a decent salesman. And I think that I got out of private law practice. I only was in private law practice for 4 years. I think I got out of private law practice before it ruined me, if you don't mind the humor, or at least an attempt at it. I think if you practice law for 20 years, cautioning people on risk management, it's hard to shift the mindset of selling people on committing their dollars and so on. But I think my boss saw in me after the 2 LBOs on IPO, the ability to sell that stuff. So he moved me to CFO. I was literally CFO a year, and I went to him and said, okay, I'm about to turn 40. I'm getting close to it anyway. I've made some pretty good money. I've got liquidity and net worth I never imagined I would have. So I'm going to go out and just see what the world is, because it's just time. And so he was quiet about that for, let's just say 60 days. And then he came back to me and said, well, why don't you move to the COO position and just run the company? And Dan, the truth was I was already playing that role, but didn't have the title, didn't have the pay,
right?
Didn't have the formal responsibility. There was no COO functionally, And so I didn't think about it a long time. I just said, okay, I mean, I wanted a new experience. That was a new experience,
Mm-hmm.
So when I had been with the company just over 9 years, I think that's right, 93, 84, I was made COO. And at that point, I really did formally have responsibility for day-to-day operation of the company. I was the only person who reported to the CEO. Everybody reported to me then, directly or indirectly. And I began rebuilding the management team. I also began really not of my own doing, but it turned out to be just enormous going forward. At that same time, 93, when I became COO, began negotiating a new license agreement for the system, which really led to just enormous change in authority and cultural. It enabled us to become a modern franchisor. That the new agreement did, and I had no idea that it was going to have that result, but it did over time. So I became COO, began negotiating the license agreement, and when I'd been COO, let's just say a year and a half, rather abruptly, my boss left the company for another job, and he surprised our board of directors by this. But at the board meeting, they just said to me, "You want to be CEO?" And they didn't do a search. They didn't do anything, except offer me a job. And I thought, well, I'm running day to day already. Why not?
Right.
And it was 95. I'd been with the company for 11 years by this time, and had a pretty good idea what's what. That I had just turned 40, and so lo and behold, then, so how did I get there? I've kind of laid that out for you. But then, who would have known? Next 23 years, I was CEO of the company, and we built it from about 900 million in system-wide sales to 4.5 billion. And when I took over as CEO, the market capitalization was 200 million, and later we sold it for 2.3 billion. So it was a good
Quite
run.
a run.
Yeah, quite a run, and a very enjoyable one that changed a lot of people's lives for the better. And that's one of my biggest points of pride.
What I would love to hear some stories of opportunity that Sonic brought that maybe other franchise groups didn't be able to provide for the franchisees. Like, did your franchisees have a significant stake in their business or Sonic, or how did you structure it so that motivations and everybody was aligned in the same direction?
Yeah, well, that's a great objective you just described. Everybody aligned in the same direction. Our franchisees, if they owned stock in the company, it was because they just went to the marketplace and bought it. There was some of them, but not a whole lot. And I think they were always in a unique position to know, were sales up or were sales down, because
Right.
they're experiencing it. But I think a lot of them would say, hey, sales are pretty good. I'm going to buy some stock and let it run up and then sell it, and then you go back in when they saw opportunity. I think a lot of them did that for years, But by and large, they look to get their money off their franchise operations. And so how do we get things aligned? For years and years and years, and our common friend Scott McLean can testify to this in spades. For years and years and years, our statement to them is, and part when we put together objectives for the years, we told them what we hoped to build their average unit sales and average unit profits in that next 12 months. And when we had multi-year plans, we said our objective is to get you to this higher sales level, this higher profit level. And they always knew if they believed it, I think they came to believe it. And that was my perspective, that there was no way for the franchisor to win if the franchisees didn't win with us.
Mm-hmm.
The only way for us to, as a franchisor, to win in the long run was to have healthy and growing franchisees. Made that abundantly clear to them, and given how they went with our initiatives and put money back into growth and capital investment in their businesses, I think intuitively they came to believe that we were sincere about that. That's how we got that, very much aligned. It was all about building the positive customer experience at the store level, and in turn, franchisee, store level operator, sales, and profitability.
Right.
So
right.
that was always the focus.
When we look for public company CEOs to invest in and their management team, we reference a research study called Return on Character book that is one of the pillars of our investment approach. And that book identified 4 behavior characteristics that correlated with outperformance. And those were integrity, responsibility, forgiveness, and compassion. Lots of times people are surprised about the forgiveness and compassion part of that, of the 4. How does that resonate in your experience, with managing people? And speak to me a little bit about, how those 4 characteristics resonate with you as you reflect back on kind of your time Sonic and managing what was a tremendously growth-oriented company that did really, really well.
Well, I am not familiar with the book that you've just named, and I'm fascinated with the framework you've laid out, and I will be picking it up. Just immediately. You mentioned that it's out on audio. An audio version, and a late week. I may have about a 3-hour drive in the car, and this would be a great time to download it and start listening to it. I read regularly. I don't want you to think I don't read. I just know I'm going to be in the car Friday. So
hey, Cliff, my kids make fun of me all the time because all I do is listen. They think, oh well, it's like you get half credit for listening to an entire history book on LinkedIn or and they laugh and they look at me like I can't read. And I
Yeah.
stand firm. I say it's far more efficient to listen and do other things than to sit.
Well, my little book, Master of None, is out on audiobook as well. So feel free to.
Okay, I'm going to listen to that. That's the deal.
That's my own little plug, and but yeah, hopefully you would enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed reading it out loud. So
But again, the book is on audio, and it's called
Master of None: How a Jack of All Trades Can Still Reach the Top.
That's great.
So
that's great. By Cliff Hudson.
Your framework of compassion, forgiveness, responsibility, integrity. I think in some ways I would have liked to have had that framework in a top of mind, conscious sort of way in the years I was running the company. But I think those characteristics came in a big way, different ways with each. When you're running a franchise system, now I think of integrity to a considerable degree. There are different ways to think about that, but a considerable degree, it is that your public and your private discussions have to completely align. And when you tell people this is what we're going to do, you have to be saying this for a reason. The reason is you fully intend to do that,
Right.
And then you got to follow through with it, and you've got to reward them when they follow through, and maybe you don't reward them or do some of the reverse when they're not following through with you. But the integrity piece is, living with your word and having your public and private word and deed be completely consistent each with the other. And I think we did that pretty good at Sonic. I mean, I think we did that. I think we did that within the company. I think we were very transparent about our goals and transparent about who had opportunity and how and why and so on. Very transparent with our franchisees about where we want to go and how we're going to get there on a quarter basis, on a year basis, multi-year basis. Very open relationship with franchisees. If you came to some of our meetings with franchisees, I think you might have a hard time figuring out who was a corporate employee and who was an individual franchise owner, Very good relationships there. We didn't pursue any initiative of any sort without franchisee engagement, testing, and verification. So I think the whole that's a way of building a culture, but that also does go to integrity in terms of being very open about what you say you're going to do, have public and private discussions be consistent, and then follow through and then rewarding those who come with you on that. So the integrity I love. The compassion piece, I think, comes in a variety of ways. I like compassion better than passion. You often hear in business, why do you have a passion for it? Well, I think in some ways the better question may be, if you're going to be a leader, is do you have compassion for your folks? And it's interesting because the passion is like a subset of the compassion. But part of the compassion piece for your folks, and if you're going to be a leader, is their success critical to you? Because if it's not, they're going to know it. They will know it through and through. And as part of your culture, if you are working to help change lives for the better, if you're working to help people have successful careers and you understand where they want to go and you're going to help them get there and then how that's going to pay off for them. And if they know and believe that, they'll stay with you through thick and thin, So I love the compassion concept much more than just having passion for the job, because I think a leader, it's a critical point that the people that are being led have to understand that you are intimately interested in betting on their success,
Right.
The other is the responsibility. I guess I would have always, I go back to my days of delivering newspapers, I would have viewed that as almost first base, square one, And if an executive leader doesn't have that sense of personal responsibility, pushes it off on others, blames others. I had an executive new to the company one time, and a problem popped up that was a serious problem. It was a nice problem. The promotion was so successful, we were running out of product. And the new fellow, when we had a meeting to talk about what we're going to do, the new fellow who had been a part of this was immediately pointing fingers about who had screwed up.
Hmm.
And my comment to him was, hey, stop. We got to fix this. So the issue, to use your terminology, was one of taking responsibility to fix it, not shift
Right.
responsibility to help your own career, you know? And those 2 points, by the way, this responsibility, the assuming responsibility and that concept of compassion for others, those go hand in hand. Because if you won't take responsibility for your own actions in particular, then other people in the organization are going to know you're a fraud,
Right.
and they're not going to believe you're out to help them in any way. They're going to look at you and they're going to be concerned that what you really are is a backstabber. Anyway, responsibility I would view as, I mean, if there's any question about a person's assumption of responsibility, they have no business being, a lead executive of any kind of complex organization. So I love that one. The forgiveness is a fascinating one because it comes in, first of all, if you don't have the characteristic in life, then your life's pretty tough, and yet in an organization, what we used to say is, okay, we screwed up. Now, how do we fix it? And in a way, from an organizational standpoint, from an enterprise standpoint, there is an element of forgiveness there. The question is not who do we punish when things go wrong. The question is what we learn from it, And I think that even the forgiveness there is we're going to learn to forgive ourselves when we screw up. If you
That's
have
right.
someone, if you have someone that makes the same mistake over and over again, well, okay, that's a different issue. That's not forgiveness. That's just bad judgment or something, But anyway, I would like to think in Sonic, though we never called it forgiveness, I would like to think that we were open about our mistakes. We'd tell the board, we'd even tell stockholders where we screwed up and what we were doing to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think my longevity and comfort with the company, I didn't have to cover for myself. And I think it probably helped me talk that way with my officers and franchisees and so on, gave people comfort in acknowledging that we screwed up. And then the strength to, forgive ourselves and keep moving,
Well, without even reading the book, you pretty much, recited it. All those characteristics and examples are things that they found in research correlates to managerial and company success, but it's run contrary to a lot of public company leadership today. I mean, what are your thoughts on, you were a public company, so you had quarterly demands on you. You had Wall Street, asking you to do certain things that maybe you weren't comfortable with based on just pure profit motives and shareholders. What do you think of the shareholders' supremacy mentality around the management companies and how it kind of relates with the way companies are being led today? Are we seeing a trend away from that? Are we seeing a trend back to it? What's your perspective on kind of how companies are being led today, and good and bad?
Yeah. Well, first, there's access to capital today of a whole variety of sorts that we didn't have 30 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we went public because that seemed to be well, in fact, what we had was we had a 51% stockholder who wanted to go public, and so that was it. But we once we had committed that we were going to be really a franchise-focused company, and we were not eating up a lot of capital. We really didn't need to be public. We just couldn't find a way to afford to go private.
Right.
If the stock was down, nobody wanted to loan you money. If the stock was up, it was too expensive. And so until Rourke came along and was just willing to pay whatever it took, that was the first time where the potential seemed real for it to go private. So I had to say, if I had a company like Sonic again at this point, I would prefer to be private, not public. You can more easily run it for the long run, and not be worried about what happened this quarter. You do have to take care of customers every day, so it's not as though that goes away. But if you want to make long-term investments in facilities, in technology, et cetera, you could do that even though it has a negative impact on margins. If you have the confidence and reason to believe that it's all going to pay off. So the markets can be very short term, and it's I think with a franchisor, not just depending on who the shareholders of the company are, but franchisees signing 15 and 20-year notes, being able to take a long-term focus is a critical element to sustain success. The public company thing, I think, is tough. But if you need access to that kind of capital, then it's one spot in a much more efficient marketplace, capital markets today.
Do you think being public makes it hard to do the right thing as leaders and managers for the company long term?
I never felt compromised from that standpoint as in hard to do the right thing. I did feel pressure at times, and but you feel in a franchise organization, and in our case, deal with customers $6 at a time. You always felt pressure because sales were great today. What about tomorrow? Sales are great this week. What about next week? Sales are great this month. What about next month? I mean, that was not a public company deal. That was running a brand where customers were engaging with you $6 at a time, and they might make their decision on 3 minutes notice. So you had to do something to constantly have top of mind awareness with consumers. That was more of nature of just the business, not a public market. I didn't ever feel compromised or like I was making bad decisions because they were short-term decisions. Did I feel a sense of urgency at times to produce results? Yes. Because you always had to live with the quarter. I felt that urgency, but I can't sitting here today recall any decision I made that I would not have made,
Right.
had we not been a public company. I come up a little short on that.
What was if there was one moment in your history at Sonic that tested the mettle of the company and the culture and even your leadership, anything come to mind?
Well, maybe 2 or 3 different times, but one that I think really took Sonic to a different place altogether was trying to convince operators in 2012, so just over 10 years ago, trying to convince operators to really reallocate marketing dollars. When I joined the company, there really was no centralized marketing, none. And so if you fast forward almost 20 years, I joined in 84, go to 2012, we were spending by that time easily something north of $150 million on marketing by then. But all the money was collected, almost all the money was collected through local marketing cooperatives. So Dallas, the DFW area is one television market. And so you collected the money from operators in Dallas. And at that point, let's just say half of it would go from that co-op towards a national cable effort, and the other half stayed local, something like that. Coming out of the Great Recession, we had far-flung markets, not core markets, that they were suffering and so on. And I sat down with a new buyer, a national buyer by the name of Zenith out of New York City. And I asked them, I said, okay, you've seen the way we collect our money and how we spend it. If I could break that up and not have it tied to geography, and I turned to you and said, see this money? Spend it however you see best across the country. I said, could you bring me, for the same dollars, could you bring me more gross rating points? And they said, oh, yeah. And I said, could you bring me a lot more? And they said, oh, yeah. And I said, could you do it in such a way that you would, for the same dollars, radically increase gross rating points for 100% of the system, every single market? They said, oh, yeah. And so we went about, that conversation with them was in May of 12. And so May, June, we went about rapidly devising a plan to sit down and show our operators, if you'll let go of this old bias about everything being on your local NBC affiliate, your local CBS affiliate, whatever, let go of that. Let's put it in one big pot. And I can show you how your gross rating points, a lot of this had changed because cable had changed. And in no small part because national cable had changed. And if you would buy 100 million instead of 1 million, you could just get a hell of a deal. Dallas might spend $500,000 on some football games. But if they would agree to work with ESPN and the whole system, spend $5 million, I mean, we'd be on the best football games. We would own the scoreboard. We'd own the halftime report. We'd own it was huge, So that was tough because our operators had always spent money and locally, and they were very distrusting at the idea of putting it into a national pot where they lost it, And so that was in that summer of 12, it was a tough, ugly negotiation, but one which, from my standpoint, we absolutely needed in order to move our system to a different place. And the convincing operators, the franchise leadership coming together, it was ugly. They were fighting with each other. There were so many oxes getting gored because of how many people. This is not a joke. How many of our operators got free trips from the local NBC affiliate? And if you're going to pull all that money nationally, then boom, that goes away.
Their lifestyle changes.
And we had a deal under our license agreement that if we got 2/3 of the system, I think that was the number. If we got two stores representing 2/3 of the system to vote for the shift, then everybody had to do it. And by our convention in September, but let me tell a little story first.
Please.
The concern on some of our folks' part was our old time large franchisees wouldn't go for it. So my question was, okay, give me the name of the number one guy you think would not go for this. They gave me his name. I said, okay. I called the guy up. Let's have dinner. He said, what's the topic? I said, you'll see when we get to dinner. So we had dinner with him and two of his partners, and our guys got up and showed him. Most of his stores were, as it turned out, were in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
We showed him, you will not have to put 1 penny more into marketing, and we will bring you a 60% increase in gross rating points.
Wow.
And he cut us off and said, why wouldn't I do this? And we said, there's no reason why he wouldn't. He was our first test case. We were, some of our folks.
And you needed to win him over, probably, right?
Exactly. And so, we had in that July, August, and then in September in the convention timeframe, we got the 2/3, and then at convention, everybody folded in, 90+% approval. Just in time to buy national media for January of 13. I mean, October was when you had to start buying. End of September, I think you had to have your money in for January. And our business exploded in 13, 14, 15, 16. That really, Sonic had been growing toward becoming more of a national brand. But let me give you one anecdote. For 20 years, the number one store in the system was in El Dorado, Arkansas. It was the first store to hit 2 million in sales in a year. It was the first store to hit 3 million in sales in a year. In 13, we rolled out this national advertising. In 14, 15, 16, our highest sales volume store in the entire system was in Long Island, New York. And every year they were opening a new store in Long Island, New York, and they were setting new records. and they hit 4 million and 5 million AUV at those stores when the system was doing 1.3 million. So that national cable, that's one story to show how that national cable made us a national brand, and all these far-flung markets, their business just took off and really did make Sonic a national brand. But that was a tough moment of where leadership, openness, communication, integrity about the position, but taking responsibility and pushing it forward. That's what took the business to another level altogether.
And all your skills that you learned back in high school,
push
forward.
Yeah. When I think about, some of the things that some people went through during those years, and literally, some of the physical damage in my high school, but I'm thinking about civil rights leaders, etc. If you can't stand before a hostile franchise advisory group and just sell them on a media issue, then get the hell out,
Oh man, That's a great story. Now, so your younger self, or for up and coming executives today, as we close out, I don't want to take more time than we've already been so kind to give us, but what advice would you have for folks in general as it relates to leadership in whatever organization and whatever spot they find themselves in?
Right. Well, if it's a younger person, hold on. If it's a younger person, I think about when I joined Sonic in my late 20s. I do think in some strange way these days, our younger population somehow believes it's going to have its path defined. And if they don't understand the path, if they can't tell you the path they're going to be on, they feel like they're off. They're off. They're off. They're not on the right path. And one of the things I say in my book to that younger person reading the book is, give yourself a break. The journey is what it's all about. And so be open to the journey. Don't try to define the journey. Don't try to define the outcome. Be open to the journey. Keep your eyes open. Keep your head up. Find what works for you, what feels something you can be successful at the appropriate moment in time. But don't feel like you have to, at 25 and 30 years old or 35 years old, already achieve what some penultimate success is. Because if you believe that, you're going to set yourself up, for a sense of failure,
Yeah.
So
I love that.
I could
say so right on.
General advice I would give to a younger person, particularly if you don't have a fixed, narrow specialty. You're not a brain surgeon. You're not a CPA. But if you're a generalist like I was, then cut yourself some slack. Be open.
That's amazing advice for all of us that have a specific track, but we rely on kind of the good fortune of life to guide us along the way. And it really takes a sense of letting go and not trying to control everything to do that. And, but your book, A Master of None, How a Jack of All Trades Can Still Reach the Top, is, I think, perfectly form-fitted for so many young folks out there with that kind of psychological pressure that they carry in getting to the thing that they think they need to get to. Anyway, I'm just so grateful for your contribution at Sonic, the stories, but then more importantly, you don't have to get on this podcast and talk to us about things. You're not plugging any products. You're not the CEO. You're just kind of giving back what you learned. And I just want to thank you for that. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for the kind comments. I appreciate that. But thank you for the focus that your podcast has on these areas of compassion, integrity, forgiveness, responsibility, good life skills to develop, great business leadership skills to develop. So
Yeah.
you really delightful.
Well, thanks again for being with us.
Very good. Thank you.